call this meeting to order, excuse me. Mrs. Burns, would you call the roll, please?
Yes. Mr. Parentano.
Present.
Mr. Allen.
Present.
Mrs. Bowman.
Here.
Ms. Boyle.
I hear.
Mrs. Hallenbeck.
Present.
And Mr. Kovitz, you said is not in attendance. Mr. Marrington. Mr. Marrington.
Mute myself. Yeah, I'm here.
Mr. Cirillo.
Here.
And Mr. Sullivan.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. All stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Joe, can we mute everybody, please?
He muted you, Steve.
I muted myself. I'm good. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All righty. We're going to start with special action item 2.01, continuation of the suspension aspects of policy number 006.1. Whereas the novel coronavirus, COVID-19, continues to create an environment where the Board of School Directors is unable to hold its meeting in a physical location. Now, therefore, be it resolved in accordance with Board Policy 003 that the Neshaminy Board of School Directors hereby approves the continuation of the temporary suspension of policy 006.1, attendance at meetings via electronic communication, originally approved March 24th, 2020, until the next meeting of the board. Motion's been made. Can I have a second?
Second.
Second.
My second by Mr. Allen. Roll call vote, Mrs. Burns?
Mr. Allen.
Yes.
Mrs. Bowman.
Yes.
Ms. Boyle. Ms. Boyle.
Yes.
Mrs. Hallenbeck.
Yes.
Mr. Marrington.
Yes.
Mr. Parentano.
Yes.
Mr. Cirillo.
Yes.
And Mr. Sullivan.
Yes.
8 yes.
All right, thank you. Our executive session statement, the board met in executive session this evening prior to the meeting to discuss matters of employment, issues related to labor relations, and matters related to school safety and security. Our district's mission statement is the Neshaminy community builds futures by empowering each child to become a productive citizen and lifelong learner. That will bring us to announcement. Mrs. Burns, do you have any announcements?
No announcements.
Thank you. Mr. Jones, superintendent report, please.
Good evening. Oh, let me see here. Good evening, everyone. We continue in a virtual meeting format. The dates for our meetings are posted in the superintendent's report. They're also at the end of the board docs document itself for the agenda. So we have 2 upcoming full board meetings in June. We have a July meeting as well for the board at the end of July, and then another one in August. That'll take us through the summer months. We're listing them all as virtual at this time. The only other meeting that's happening is there's going to be a business operations committee meeting early June 2nd. That's next week. The meal distribution continues to go well for the district. Just FYI for the community, for the board, we took Monday off for our food workers, but we did deliver 5 days worth of meals on the Friday of last week. And then students will pick back up again. Families will pick back up again on Wednesday. We thank our food service workers who have been phenomenal throughout this downtime for the school. Pequessing Middle School had a virtual Hope Walk and Spirit Week. Normally, the students hold that walkathon on school property. This is just one example of many ways that schools are being very creative while we're home, but still engaging with students. Pequessing had a music recital over the Zoom platform, and all of our schools are doing some very interesting things similar to that across the board. Locker cleanouts continue now. All high school and middle school grade students' families have been informed of when locker pickup will be. 7th grade is being coordinated now this week. I think 6th grade next week. High schools up to the 11th grade, and they'll be taking care of 9th and 10th as well. Elementary school continues to be a bit of a process for us to figure out. But we will soon have communication going out to elementary families for that matter as well, cleaning out their classroom and cubbies. Senior tax rebate, a reminder that the deadline to apply has been extended to July 31st. You can click on the superintendent's report or find some information on our website. Either way, July 31st is the deadline for that local rebate program for our senior taxpayers. Bucks County superintendents continue to meet, just keeping the board and community informed of the fact that Bucks County IU has coordinated superintendents meetings that were initially for many, many weeks, daily meetings for the superintendents across the 13 school districts here, public schools in the county, to meet, to keep on the same page with respect to how we were responding early on to the pandemic. We continue to meet multiple times during the week, regularly scheduled meetings. And a lot of that conversation has obviously shifted now to next school year. Dr. McGee has joined me in those meetings simply because the tenor of the conversation is so much about July, August, and September. Board committee meeting, I did mention already that we have a Tuesday, June 2nd, business operations committee meeting. Our future problem solving team continues to compete even in this virtual world. They were supposed to be headed to Massachusetts to compete after being state championship winners. They were going on to what was called the Future Problem Solvers International World Bowl, but now that will be a virtual activity, and that happens the first week in June. We wish them luck. Chris Stanley continues to do phenomenal work for the district. You could really watch all the good work that's happening across the district simply by being a subscriber or a regular viewer of our Facebook page. One of the newer, nicer features is our opportunity to spotlight graduates. You will find daily Chris updating twice a day on most cases with slides for all of our graduating seniors, spotlighting each one on a separate slide. They've been well received. Our high school administrators got out to all of our military bound graduating seniors. It's a program. Let me just go here for my mute. Hold on. It's a program that since 2009, Neshaminy has been recognizing graduating seniors who are moving on to serve in one of our branches, armed forces. And this year, we didn't want that activity to cease, to come to a halt. And so by bus, a nice contingent of Neshaminy staff were able to thank each and every one of those young people with family present at their homes. Social distance rules were abided by. Flowers were delivered to the parent, and it was a very moving tribute in person for those people involved, but also just watching Chris Stanley's production that he put on our Facebook. Definitely meaningful for all involved. I thank all of them. And then we continue to just thank everybody who's working on the front lines. I talked earlier about our food service people who are on the front lines, but certainly in our communities, a lot of people helping to support in many ways. And again, it's another feature that Chris Stanley has on our Facebook page where Neshaminy alumni who are on those front lines are being featured by Chris when people are able to spotlight individuals in their family or their community. And I thank him for that as well. Thank you very much. That's my report for this evening.
Public comment is for 3 minutes. Please identify yourself, your name. Please spell your last name for the record, for the board secretary. Give us the area which you live in. Also give us your occupation. Please, no personal attacks during the conversation. Be respectful. And if you wish, you're more than welcome to turn your video on during public comment. Mr. Stanley will direct those and call those to the microphone. Mr. Stanley?
Thank you. Yeah, we'll do this by using the raise the hand feature, which can be found at the bottom of your screen under participants. And if you find your name, that's one of the options. If you raise your hand, I will call on you, and then you can begin speaking. Give it a few seconds. Do we have any takers? Once, going twice. I think that's it, Mr. Peritano.
Thank you, Mr. Stanley. I'll bring us to routine matters. I'd like to make a master motion for item 4.01 minutes, 4.02 treasurer's report, 4.03 check register and procurement card purchases, 4.0 bids, 4.05 exonerations. Motion's been made. May I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Sullivan. Any comments, questions, or concerns? Hearing none. Mrs. Burns, call the roll, please.
Mr. Allen? Mr. Allen?
Sorry, yes. Forgot I was muted.
Mrs. Bowman?
Yes.
Ms. Boyle?
Yes.
Mrs. Hallenbeck?
Yes.
Mr. Marrington?
Yes.
Mr. Parentano?
Yes.
Mr. Cirillo?
Yes.
And Mr. Sullivan?
Yes.
8 yes.
Thank you. Motion passes 8-0. Brings us to section 5. Excuse me. Brings us to section 5, 5.01 annual appointments. Whereas the Neshaminy Board of School Directors is required to make annual appointments due to the state and federal mandates. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Neshaminy Board of School Directors hereby approves the annual appointments noted below for school year 2020-2021. I'm going to ask for a second.
Second.
Second by Mr. Cirillo. Any comments, questions, or concerns? Hearing none. Excuse me. Mrs. Burns, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Allen?
Yes.
Mrs. Bowman?
Yes.
Ms. Boyle?
Yes.
Mrs. Hallenbeck?
Yes.
Mr. Marrington?
Yes.
Mr. Parentano?
Yes.
Mr. Cirillo?
Yes.
And Mr. Sullivan?
Yes.
8 yes.
Motion passes 8-0. Mr. Marrington, would you please read 5.02?
Whereas the Neshaminy Board of School Directors is required to make annual appointments due to state and federal.
That's 501, Dave. 502.
All right, let's try it again. Whereas each year during the month of May, the board must elect a treasurer to serve for the year beginning July 1st. Now therefore be it resolved that the Neshaminy Board of Directors hereby approves Donald B. Irwin Jr., Business Administrator, to be appointed treasurer of the Neshaminy Board of School Directors for the term beginning July 1st, 2020, with no additional compensation associated with the appointment.
Thank you, Mr. Marrington. The motion's been made. May I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Hollenbeck. Any comments, questions, or concerns? Roll call vote, Mrs. Burns?
Mr. Allen?
Yes.
Mrs. Bowman?
Yes.
Ms. Boyle?
Yes.
Mrs. Hallenbeck?
Yes.
Mr. Marrington?
Yes.
Mr. Parentano?
Yes.
Mr. Cirillo?
Yes.
Mr. Sullivan?
Yes.
8-0.
Motion passes 8-0. At this particular time, I'm going to call a master motion for items 5.03, 5.04, 5.05, 5.06, 5.07, 5.09, 5.10, and 5.11. Motion's been made. May I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Sullivan. Any comments, questions, or concerns? Hearing none, roll call vote, Mrs. Burns?
Mr. Allen,
Yes.
Mrs. Bowman,
Yes.
Ms. Boyle,
Yes.
Mrs. Hallenbeck,
Yes.
Mr. Marrington,
Yes.
Mr. Parentano,
Yes.
Mr. Cirillo,
Yes.
Mr. Sullivan,
Yes.
8 yes.
This time I'm going to make a motion for 5.08 breakfast lunch pricing. Be it resolved that the Neshaminy School Board of Directors hereby establishes the following 2020-21 school year breakfast lunch prices for the 2021, reflecting no change from the current school year prices. Motion's been made. May I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Cirillo. Any comments, questions, or concerns? May I have a roll call vote, Mrs. Burns?
Mr. Allen,
Yes.
Mrs. Bowman,
Yes.
Ms. Boyle,
Yes.
Mrs. Hallenbeck,
Yes.
Mr. Marrington,
Yes.
Mr. Parentano,
Yes.
Mr. Cirillo,
Yes.
Mr. Sullivan,
Yes.
8 yes.
Motion passes 8-0. Mrs. Bowman, would you please read 5.12?
Sure. 5.12, be it resolved that the Neshaminy Board of School Directors hereby approves the adoption of the Neshaminy School District Tax Bill of Rights, Taxpayer Bill of Rights for 2020 to 2021.
Thank you. May I have a second?
Second.
Second, was that Mrs. Boyle?
Yes.
Yes, second by Mrs. Boyle. Any comments, questions, or concerns? Hearing none, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Allen,
Yes.
Mrs. Bowman,
Yes.
Ms. Boyle,
Yes.
Mrs. Hallenbeck,
Yes.
Mr. Marrington,
Yes.
Mr. Parentano,
Yes.
Mr. Cirillo,
Yes.
Mr. Sullivan,
Yes.
8 yes.
Motion passes 8-0. Mr. Sullivan, would you please read section 6, please?
Yes, Mr. Jones, could you scroll that down? I'd like to make a master motion to approve items 6.01, retirements, resignations, end of assignments, 6.02, revised, returns from leave, 6.03, revised leaves of absence, and 6.04, appointments.
Thank you. There's been a motion. May I have a second?
Second.
Who was that?
Mrs. Hallenbeck.
Mrs. Hollenbach with a second. Any comments, questions, or concerns? Hearing none, I just want to take the opportunity and note that we have two people leaving us, both with 25 years of service and 27 years of service from our certified staff. And we have in our support staff, we have a person with 20 years of service leaving us. Neshaminy thanks you for your dedication and service all those years. Mrs. Burns, may you call the roll, please?
Yeah. Mr. Allen,
Yes.
Mrs. Bowman,
Yes.
Mrs. Hallenbeck,
Yes.
Mr. Marrington,
Yes.
Mr. Parentano,
Yes.
Mr. Cirillo,
Yes.
Mr. Sullivan,
Yes.
8 yes.
Motion carries 8-0. Thank you. That brings us to section 8, business operations. Normally, we would have Mrs. Hollenbach read all of them.
Doesn't 7 come first?
I'm sorry.
Here's Stu.
That brings us to Mrs. Hollenbach. Would you make a motion for section 7, please?
I'd like to make a master motion to approve 7.01 retirements, resignations, end of assignments, and 7.02 revised returns from leave.
Motion's been made. May we have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Sullivan. Comments, questions, or concerns? Hearing none, roll call vote, Mrs. Burns?
Mr. Allen,
Yes.
Mrs. Bowman,
Yes.
Ms. Boyle,
Yes.
Mrs. Hallenbeck,
Yes.
Mr. Marrington,
Yes.
Mr. Parentano,
Yes.
Mr. Cirillo,
Yes.
Mr. Sullivan,
Yes.
8 yes.
Motion passes 8-0. Now that brings us to section 8. Normally, we would have Mrs. Hollenbach read all of this and we would all get a laugh. But we're going to take it easy on her this evening. And I'm going to ask Mr. Cirillo if you would read 8.01.
Whereas the Neshaminy School District is required by law to provide special education and related services to children from preschool through age 21, and whereas a number of our students have significant academic needs for which we do not operate programs, now therefore be it resolved that the Neshaminy Board of School Directors hereby approves the service agreement with the Bucks County Intermediate Unit number 22 for the 2021 school year at a projected estimated cost of $5,716,944.
Thank you, Mr. Cirillo. A motion's been made. May I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Allen. Any comments, questions, or concerns? Hearing none. Mrs. Burns, a roll call vote, please.
Mr. Allen,
Yes.
Mrs. Bowman,
Yes.
Ms. Boyle,
Yes.
Mrs. Hallenbeck, Mrs. Hallenbeck,
Yes, sorry.
Mr. Marrington,
Yes.
Mr. Parentano,
Yes.
Mr. Cirillo,
Yes.
and Mr. Sullivan,
Yes.
8
Thank
yes.
you. Thank you, Mrs. Burns. Motion passes 8-0. Mr. Allen, would you please read 8.02?
Yes, Mr. President. 8.02, whereas in order to provide technical high school education for our students, 6 lower Bucks County school districts cooperatively established the Bucks County Technical High School, and whereas each participating school district must annually vote on the technical high school's annual budget, now therefore be it resolved that the Neshaminy Board of School Directors hereby approves the 2020 through 2021 Bucks County Technical High School budget in the total amount of $30,714,244, operating budget of $28,559,839, with the Neshaminy School District 2020 through 2021
That's correct.
net fiscal payment to be $182,917.
Yeah, those big numbers get me all the time too, John. The motion's been made. May I have a second?
Second.
By Mrs. Bowman. Any comments, questions, or concerns? I would just like to thank our committee to the Bucks County Technical High School for the work that they do there. Our students are well served by that school, and our community is well served by the participation of our committee members.
Thank you.
Mrs. Burns, would you please call the roll?
Yes, Mr. Allen,
Yes.
Mrs. Bowman,
Yes.
Ms. Boyle,
Yes.
Mrs. Hallenbeck,
Yes.
Mr. Marrington,
Yes.
Mr. Parentano,
Yes.
Mr. Cirillo,
Yes.
Mr. Sullivan,
Yes.
8 yes.
Motion passes 8-0. Brings us to 8.03. Mrs. Hollenbach, would you please read that?
Of course, you saved the longest one for me. Thanks, John. Whereas Pennsylvania, more than 1.7 million public school students deserve the highest quality education. I can't read all. There's like a thing in my way here.
The screen's in your way?
Hold on. There we go.
You got it?
Deserve the highest quality education, and the state's public school works best when they have the resources to give all students the opportunities they need to succeed. And whereas Pennsylvania ranks 44th among the 50 states in the amount of state subsidies allocated to support elementary and secondary education, among the lowest in the nation, with the state share of funding public education and 38%. And whereas Pennsylvania has the widest funding gap between wealthy and poor school districts of any state in the country. And whereas the state has failed to keep pace with the rising costs of mandated special education for students with disabilities, which has increased by $1.7 billion over the last decade, even as the state's share of the cost has fallen from 32% to 22%. And whereas the state has also failed to provide adequate resources for career and technical education, CTE, pathways for students, allowing its share of CTE funding to fall to 8%, leaving local taxpayers with a 90% share of the CTE budget. And whereas the Neshaminy Board of School Directors recognizes the unique circumstances due to the COVID-19 global pandemic will cause a shortfall in revenue for the Commonwealth's upcoming 2020-2021 fiscal year budget. And whereas the failure of the General Assembly to maintain its current level of education funding would irreparably damage the students of Neshaminy School District and the entire Middletown Township, Langhorne, Langhorne Manor, Pendle, Humeville, and Lower Southampton Township communities. Now, therefore, be it resolved.
We lost you there, Tina.
2021 fiscal year budget at a minimum maintain its current level of education funding. Be it further resolved that a copy of this resolution be submitted to the elected Senator Robert M. Tomlinson and Representative Frank A. Farry, Tina M. Davis, and John T. Galloway in the General Assembly and to the Governor of Pennsylvania.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Hollenbeck.
Steve,
Yes.
Mr. Chair, kind of point of order. I think the second to last paragraph was completely silent when Tina was
All right, I'll read it. The second to last paragraph of the motion was, now therefore be it resolved that the Neshaminy School District urges the General Assembly to prioritize public education in the Commonwealth 2020-2021 fiscal year budget and at a minimum maintain its current level of educational funding. A motion has been made. May I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Bowman. Any comments, questions, or concerns? I'd just like to add for commentary that just this early afternoon, I actually heard from State Representative Farry that the state's, even though that the state's only moving forward with a 5-month general budget, that the educational funding is set for 12 months. What the levels are going to be and how much increases there are, we don't know at this time, but at least that's a good development. May I get a roll call vote, Mrs. Burns?
Yes, Mr. Allen,
Yes.
Mrs. Bowman,
Yes.
Ms. Boyle,
Yes.
Mrs. Hallenbeck,
Yes.
Mr. Marrington,
Yes.
Mr. Parentano,
Yes.
Mr. Cirillo,
Yes.
Mr. Sullivan,
Yes.
8 yes.
Motion passes 8-0. Thank you very much. Mrs. Boyle, would you please read 9.01?
Whereas the school district's special education plan is an action plan that describes the local board of school directors' commitment to ensure that a quality education will be provided to students with disabilities. And whereas each school district shall develop a special education plan aligned with the strategic plan under Pennsylvania School Code 4.13. Now therefore be it resolved that the Neshaminy School District Board of Directors approves the 2020-2023 Neshaminy School District Special Education Plan Report.
Thank you, Mrs. Boyle. Motion's been made. May I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Cirillo. Any comments, questions, or concerns? Hearing none. Mrs. Burns, a roll call vote, please.
Mr. Allen,
Yes.
Mrs. Bowman,
Yes.
Ms. Boyle,
Yes.
Mrs. Hallenbeck,
Yes.
Mr. Marrington,
Yes.
Mr. Parentano,
Yes.
Mr. Cirillo,
Yes.
Mr. Sullivan,
Yes.
8 yes.
Motion passes 8-0. That'll bring us to other board business. Is there any other board business from the members they would like to discuss?
I have a question.
Go right ahead.
Has there been any more talk? I mean, I know Bucks County is supposed to be going to yellow, hopefully June 5th. What are we looking at for graduation? We need to make sure that we do everything in our power to make sure that happens. I didn't know if we had gotten any more communication about that.
Well, it's not nice that you brought that up because we did have some of that discussion today. Currently, as I've been informed by Mr. Torrente, that the governor's yellow order will still not allow for a in-person graduation ceremony,
Right.
regardless of what happens June 5th. The Neshaminy School District, its administration, teachers, staff, and us board are still committed to the in-person graduation schedule that we laid out last month with a preferable June 27th graduation ceremony. I think it's the general feeling that that's going to give all our graduating seniors the best opportunity to attend. Those that are committed to military assignments, those that may be committed to other higher educational placements, the later dates, may leave them out. It's our position that we feel that there's no reason whatsoever that we can't conduct such a ceremony safely using the guidelines currently provided by the CDC and social distancing. Our staff is ready. I know our seniors are ready. We really want to pull this off. I've personally reached out to both Frank Farry and Tina Davis. They're committed. I also had a conversation today with Senator Tomlinson's office. They're committed. What we need right now is the governor to hopefully realize that this is important for our students. It's important for our community, and to relax these standards so that we can conduct such a ceremony. I've personally penned a letter that we're going to post on social media, and we're going to post to our Neshaminy community to encourage them to contact the governor's office and the Department of Education's office to implore them to let these kids have their celebration and give them something for this year. So we're still on course, and we're planning for contingencies, but our hope is that we will still be able to pull off a June 27th in-person graduation ceremony with safety modifications. So that's where we'll be with that. Thank you for that question, Mrs. Hollenbeck. Any other business? That'll move us to our second section of public comment. Same rules apply. It's 3 minutes. Please give your name, spell your last name for the board secretary, please. If you want to unmute your video during your 3 minutes, please do so. No personal attacks. Conduct yourself respectfully, and Mr. Stanley will control the microphone. Mr. Stanley?
Okay, we'll do this the same way as last time. If you use the raise the hand feature, which can be found by clicking on participants next to your name, and I will call people as I see them, as they show up. Do we have any takers for public comment? I'll say going once, going twice. Back to you, Mr. Piratano.
All righty. Is there nobody else? Mr. Stanley, we're all good?
Oh, we just had one show up.
All right, let's have.
Christy Richardson, please. Christy Richardson, are you there?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I had to unmute myself. I just wanted to, my husband's one of the ones that are retiring, and I know that it was posted. I mean, he was a contracted teacher for 10 years, but he has been with the school district for 20 years, and he's done an incredible job. And I know I'm a little biased because he's my husband, but both being dedicated educators to Neshaminy, I just wanted to give a shout out to my husband because I'm so proud of him.
Well, thank you very much, Mrs. Richardson, and I'm sorry I missed him in my comments, and I did not know he was with the district overall for 20 years. So thank you for his service. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Anyone else? All righty, that will bring us to board comment. We're going to start off with Mr. Jones. Mr. Jones, do you have any comments this evening?
No, thank you very much.
We're good. All righty. Let's start off with Mrs. Bowman. Do you have any comments for this evening?
I do. I just want to also thank all of our emergency responders that have been out there on the front lines helping everybody during this COVID crisis. And I also wanted to give a shout out to the administration, the superintendent, the superintendent, assistant superintendent, Mr. McGee, Ryan Staub, everyone that is currently working with Bucks County Technical High School in providing a place for us to hold a live graduation ceremony. Neshaminy has graciously volunteered to step up and give the tech school a venue for them to have their graduation. And I am just so appreciative, as is John Allen and everybody else that works on the board and works over there at the tech school. I really appreciate all the hard work you're putting in towards that. The graduation, hopefully, cross your fingers, will happen August 3rd with a rain date of August 4th in the Neshaminy Stadium. So thank you everyone that was so gracious to volunteer our stadium. Thank you. It means a lot to our seniors at the tech school.
Thank you, Mrs. Bowman. Mrs. Boyle, would you like to make any comments?
No, I think I'll pass tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Boyle. Mrs. Hollenbach, do you have any comments this evening?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Marrington, you have any comments?
No, I don't. Thank you.
All righty. Mr. Cirillo.
No comments this evening.
All righty. Mr. Sullivan.
I'll defer my time to the board president.
Thank you. Thank you. They're revolting. They're revolting on you, Marty. Mr. Allen.
Yes, I do, Mr. President. Thank you. I want to echo what Mrs. Bowman said about the tech school graduation. You know, we have June 11th as the virtual, and while that satisfies the legal graduation, you know, the community of the tech school wasn't satisfied with that. They, of course, wanted an in-house graduation, in-person graduation. Again, I am just pleased as can be that we were able to accommodate them. And I'll just throw in here for those who are students are at the tech school, cap and gowns will be picked up June 8th, 9th, and 10th. I assume they'll be contacted by the tech school administration for that. Those are those dates. And again, I want to thank our board for their you know, continued support of our partnership with our area districts and our stake in the tech school. You know, for me, personally, the tech school has a special place in my heart as a mechanical craftsman, and also the fact that I've said this 1,000 million trillion times, and my father taught there back through the 70s. So again, thank you for your support. We worked very hard to get that budget in. We had to cut a few off of our wish list there. A transformer blew up, didn't cooperate with us, so that happened. Set a few projects back, but that's how it goes. Yep. And so I'll move off of that. I want to also make mention to our military students heading forward into the military. You know, it's been a privilege to watch these students come up through our school district, watch them turn into fine young men and women that they are, and the fact that they are willing to dedicate time to service to this nation. I just want to give a special thanks to them. It's been an honor to have you as students, and you honor us by your commitment to the country. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. I'll just finish up real quick. I am very grateful to our Neshaminy administration for how they were able to conduct the military honors ceremony. I was able to watch the video that was posted. I thought that was fantastic. It never ceases to amaze me how the Neshaminy community keeps coming together and make sure that those that are willing to make a sacrifice for us to enjoy these freedoms are at least given a little bit of, let's just say, thanks through a simple ceremony. But to go to the extent that you did this year, to make sure that these students that are taking on this responsibility for all of us was rewarded was really, really nice. And I'm very grateful to those that stepped up to make that happen. Otherwise, as I spoke about earlier, as we move towards closing out this school year, we really want to see these seniors walk at the end of June. That's our goal. I hope the Neshaminy community feels the same way and will take the time to either send an email, place a phone call, not to your local reps, because our local reps are on board with this. It's the governor's office and the Secretary of Education's office that we need to get them to realize that this can be done and done safely, and they need to make an exception for the graduating seniors. So much was stolen from them this year. Let's send them off right and give them the recognition and the day that they deserve. So I hope everyone in the Neshaminy community will take that job on and see if we can get it done. Other than that, I want to thank you all for participating tonight and joining us. I'd like to make a motion to adjourn. Second?
Second.
Second.
Second by Mr. Allen. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 8-0. Thank you all and have a pleasant evening.